Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we are taking a look at a Norwegian right after World War II sniper rifle, which is actually, in fact, basically a German World War II sniper rifle. At the end of the war, thanks to the efforts of the Norwegian Resistance, there were a couple 100,000 German troops still up in Norway who hadn't been able to get out to go south to reinforce against the Allied landings in Normandy, which was a big help to the Allied war effort. When these soldiers all handed over their arms at the end of the war, Norway found itself in possession of a couple 100,000 Mauser 98Ks, and that included a bunch of Mauser 98K ZF41, basically designated squad marksman rifles. I have a separate video on this system that I'll link at the end of this video that you can check out if you're not familiar with it. The short version is this is a 1.5 power long eye relief scope that is not so much intended to make the rifle into a sniper's rifle, but to make it into a designated marksman's rifle for the purpose of, say, making good shots on small targets at relatively close range. Think, for example, the vision slit on a pillbox at 100 yards. That's the kind of shot that this was intended for. Now, after World War II, the late 1940s, the Norwegian military and the Norwegian Home Guard are in need of rifles, and certainly some sniper rifles would be kind of nice. So they have their pick of the gazillions of Mausers that are left by the Germans, which include a bunch of these, and 400 of them were taken directly into Norwegian service. Now there's a follow-up element here. These were originally used in 8mm Mauser, but Norway converted them all to 30-06 in the 1950s. Specifically, in 1950, they started getting US military aid, which included small arms, in 30-06 caliber. Their 8mm guns were useful simply because of the stockpiles of captured German ammo that they had, and the smart thinking was, in the future, we're going to be working with the Americans, let's standardize on their caliber. So the decision was made to convert all of their M98K rifles, the leftover German ones, to 30-06. The work on this project was started in 1952. The first converted rifles were available in 53, and all of them in the stockpile were converted by 56. These would not actually be further converted to 7.62 NATO, which is, that was adopted by NATO during the time that they were actively converting the guns to .06. They figured it's already a reservist sort of rifle, and they just left them in 30-06. Now, the ZF41 equipped ones are particularly interesting because I think this is actually an original German ZF41 sniper that was just put into service and given a new serial number by the Norwegians. Let me show you the details. All of the Norwegian German rifles that were put into service were given new serial numbers. There was a flat milled on the receiver right here, and then a service designation and a serial number. So this is for the Norwegian Army. You will also find them marked FLY, which is appropriately for the Norwegian Air Force, and K.ART, which is for the Coastal Artillery. So this is an Army one. The serial number on this is 150,069. The ZF41 scope-equipped rifles were specifically serial numbered from 150001 through 150400. And they added a little tag onto the German scopes with that number so that you wouldn't you wouldn't lose track of which scope went with which rifle. These scopes are an absolute nightmare to zero, and you don't want to have to re-zero it like ever if you don't have to. You will also find the serial number, or the last couple digits of it, on the top of the bolt handle there, and on the butt plate. Probably, I would think, not because they were worried about the butt plate, but because they wanted to keep the stocks with the same actions. All of the other serial numbers, like the front band here, were just left with their original German numbers. Now the designation on these rifles is M98kF1. The F1 indicates the 30-06 conversion. So we see here caliber 7.62 millimeter. That's often misinterpreted as being 7.62 NATO, but it is in fact 30-06, which is 7.62 by 63 millimeter. Looking at the top of the receiver, we can also see this notch that was cut out for the 30-06 conversion. Because the cartridge is longer than the original receiver would fit, the magazine was lengthened at the same time for the same reason. But this is a DUV-41. This is Berlin-Lübecker, 1941 production. There are the original German proofs. And we can take the scope off by pushing this button in and sliding it. It's nice and tight, sliding it backwards. What's rather interesting about this is we have a flat-sided ZF41 scope base. Now, there were originally two versions of the ZF41 bases made. The early ones were flat like this, but they were relatively quickly upgraded or improved to a version that has this sort of dovetail rail in it. And this was done so that the scope would actually get a more secure fit. You can identify the scopes for those improved rails because they have rollers that are diagonal, where the scope on this Norwegian rifle, as you can see, has flat rollers. There's the difference. Now, reproductions have been made of the improved version of the scope base, but no one's ever made a reproduction of this. And I think it is highly, highly likely that this rifle was originally a 1941 production Berlin-Lübecker ZF41 sniper. And when they rebarreled it, they simply took the scope base off, because that's how they did this, and replaced it on the new 7.62 millimeter barrel. And in fact, the scopes don't interchange. This will work better if I put the correct scope back on it. But there we go. Snaps right into place, and that is what would serve the Norwegians. The converted Mausers would serve with the Norwegian Home Guard basically until 1973. They were ultimately replaced by AG3 rifles, the Norwegian version of the G3, the HK91. Although some of these actually stayed in service all the way up until 1994, apparently, which is when they introduced a version of the AG3 with a semi-auto only selector switch. And that replaced the last of these holdout Mauser ZF41s. So, these are pretty darn rare, given how few of them were originally made, and I think it's a really interesting holdover of German World War II equipment that was used post-war because it was good stuff, it was available, and it was pretty much free at that point. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.